All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning and Development Committee meeting for Monday, November 12th, 2018. I'm calling the meeting to order. We have a quorum present. First item on the agenda is approval of the regular meeting minutes for October 8th, 2018. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Any revisions or comments? All those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. The way we do the public comment for the Planning and Development Committee meeting is we will have the public comment speak when we're calling the respective items as opposed to just having a bunch of comments at the front end. So the first item we have on the agenda for consideration is a vacation rental license for 1918 Jackson Avenue. City staff is recommending approval of a vacation rental license for the property located at that address. The vacation rental meets all of the standards and procedures for the license approval. The item was held at the October 8th meeting, and this is for action. Is there a motion?
Second.
Okay, I'll move it, and you're seconding. Okay. Alderman Simmons.
Thank you. I held it with concerns last week needing more information. I've since received photos and an explanation of the business model and the intentions for this property. If my understanding is correct, these vacation rental applications are 1 year. So with that said, I'm comfortable moving forward in support of this vacation rental.
Okay. Any further discussion from the committee? Alderman Fisk?
Yes, could you just remind me, is this the one that's owner occupied?
It is not
It's
owner
not
occupied.
owner occupied.
No,
Okay.
it's not.
Okay.
So it is being managed by a real estate professional that specializes in this sort of thing. They've done a really nice job of renovating the building, or the units rather, and furnishing them. But it is not owner occupied.
Okay, and we have a number of people signed up on the sign-up sheet, but they did not indicate which item they wanted to speak to. So do we have anybody who wanted to speak on this item, P1? Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, so that would be 6 to 1. All right, so thank you, Alderman Fisk. Okay, next item is P2, vacation rental license for 1005 Dewey Avenue. City staff is recommending approval of a vacation rental license for the property located at this address. The rental meets all of the standards and procedures for license approval, and this is also for action. Is there a motion?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I'll ask the same question of the audience. Anyone here to speak on this item? Okay, Alderman Fisk?
The same question, please. Remind me if this is owner occupied. Yes, it is. Okay, thank you. I know one of these two is.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. I'm sorry. Did you want to speak on this one, sir?
No, I was just going to say, I'm the owner.
Oh, okay.
It is owner occupied.
It is, so owner's here and he verified that it's owner occupied. Thank you for that. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that will go to the council this evening. Item P3 is Resolution 99R18, authorizing the city manager to purchase 2 vacant lots located at 2122 Darrow Avenue and 2113 Dewey Avenue. The staff is recommending approval of the resolution authorizing the city manager to purchase the 2 lots for the sum of $2, and that would be $1 a piece, as I understand it. 2122 Darrow and 2113 Dewey Avenue are vacant land acquired as foreclosed housing with the Neighborhood Stabilization Program 2, also known as NSP2 funds. The properties are being transferred to the city so that the city may close out its NSP2 grant with the HUD and do so by December 31st, 2018. This is for action. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Okay. Anyone here to speak on that item? Very good. Any further discussion? All right. Best deal I've heard all day.
Really?
$2. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And that is for action tonight. Item P4 is for introduction. This is ordinance 112-0-18, granting major zoning relief for a building lot coverage, setbacks, and open parking at 2626 Reese Avenue. City staff is recommending adoption, and the Zoning Board of Appeals is recommending denial of the ordinance for major zoning relief for a 42.5% building lot coverage where a maximum of 30% is allowed, a 3-foot side interior side yard setback where 5 feet is required for the principal structure, a 3.5 side street, 3.5-foot side yard setback where 15 feet is required for the principal structure, an 8.5-foot street side yard setback where 15 feet is required for a deck, and a 10-foot street side yard setback where 15 feet is required for a detached garage. Also, a 1-foot side, it's hard to say that, 1-foot street side yard setback where 15 feet is required for open parking. This is in the R1 Single Family Residential District. The Zoning Board of Appeals determined that the proposal did not meet all standards for major variation, and specifically that the proposal would result in a substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, or property values of the adjoining properties, and that the requested variations are not the least deviation from the applicable regulations among the feasible options identified. As I mentioned, this is for an introduction. I'll move introduction. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. We do have a number of people signed up to speak to P4. So I'll go down the list here. Is that all right with the committee? Hear from them first. Okay. Joseph, is it Parady? Parady, I'm sorry.
Thank you. My name is Joseph Parady. I reside at 2907 Hartzell Street, across the alley corner from 2626 Reese, and my statement tonight refers to item P4 on the agenda. I have personally reviewed every Planning and Development Committee agenda from 2018, and I find it remarkable that not a single item coming before this committee has had the staff recommending approval when ZBA has recommended denial. In this case, this is the second time that ZBA has unanimously denied a request from this speculator to build an inappropriate dwelling on this property. Given the expertise of the members on the ZBA and their explicit charter to adjudicate on these types of applications, it is extremely rare for this type of case to be brought before this committee. It is clear that the applicant structured the current proposal to feature an open parking space, which allows him to appeal a case that he could not win in front of the body that has the most experience and skill in this area. He appears to be attempting to leverage his political connections with members of City Council, including ones on this committee, to reach his desired outcome. As the ZBA cited in their most recent denial of the request for a major variance, this proposal does not meet the legally required standards for a major variation, City Code 6-3-8, in multiple ways, including adverse impact on the adjoining properties and requesting relief that is not the minimum necessary relief. As has been mentioned multiple times in both ZBA hearings, the applicant was fully aware of the condition of the property when it was purchased and the restrictions that this plot of land had under the existing zoning law. He is a speculator that is making a bet that he can break the City of Evanston law in order to make a healthy profit for himself and his investors. I would put to you, the members of the Planning and Development Committee of the City Council, that Evanston is not a city where we have a tradition of putting the interests of speculators above the interests of the citizens of Evanston. Nor do I believe that you or we want to start that tradition tonight. I therefore urge you to deny the proposal for ordinance 112018 regarding 2626 Reese Avenue. Thank you.
And the next speakers we have, I'll read the next three so you can kind of get ready. Nancy Crane, George Kirkpatrick, and Lisa Kirkpatrick.
Hello, I'm Nancy Crane. I live at 2821 Hartzell Street. I'm kitty corner from this property, so it's right in my line of sight. I'd like to say that other three houses on the corner meet the setbacks, which makes a mockery of this zoning ordinance, setting a precedent for other properties that could be built in the area. And the new submission after 4 p.m., we did not even have a chance to really even look at this. So really no thoughtful consideration. So we have to go back on what we already knew from the past meetings. I want to say that we love neighbors. We want to have people in our neighborhood. I just don't believe that this speculator should be allowed to break so many major variations. In fact, I don't think you should be allowed to break any major variations. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. And the Kirkpatricks?
My name is George Kirkpatrick. I live at 2904 Hartsel Street, which is the property adjacent to the property in question across the alley. I'd like to to start with by saying I support everything that Joseph said. I think he said it quite eloquently. So in the idea of brevity, I won't repeat some of the same points again. But I think it was a thoughtful approach to it. One thing I will say is that I did get the document that was submitted late this afternoon, and in it, the petitioner says that the ZBA commentary in denying this petition failed to form any consensus about a house design for a lot that could be configured in a way that would gain their approval. It's not my understanding the ZBA is in the design business. He further goes on to allude that the ZBA was not open to recommending something in the future. In other words, a more appropriate house on that lot. And if you actually read the minutes, and I have them and I can cite them, there was at least 3 ZBA members who said he was getting close, but he's not there yet. Not there yet implies that they can see a house on the property, and it's just not the one he's proposing tonight. So I would take umbrage with his approach today, and I'd just like to say that there have been other neighbors who have talked about potential houses on there, just not the size that can make the money that he wants to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Did Lisa also want to speak? Okay.
I'm Liza Kirkpatrick.
I'm sorry, Liza.
Wife of Scott Kirkpatrick, 2904 Hartsel Street, adjacent to the property. This owner is not an occupant, he's a speculator. His application is based exclusively upon the desire to extract income from the property. We should not, this is a self-inflicted hardship on the size of the house that he wants to build. When he proposed, we've been here 3 times in front of ZBA with various people. The proposal he put out last time was 11 square feet smaller than the one before, so did not take into consideration what ZBA was asking him for. I respectfully ask you to deny. Thank you.
Thank you. Next for this item is Jeff Clark. Then after that, we have Dick Horsting and Sue Carlson.
Hello, my name is Jeff Clark. I currently own the property at 2815 Hartsel. Previous to that, I lived at 2622 Hartsel, which is a 25-foot lot. That house has been there for a long time, and as Mr. Horsting's lot, the setbacks are covered by pre-existing non-conforming rules. The last time I spoke before the ZBA was not at the last meeting, but prior to that. And in my view, there are 3 ways that Mr. James can build on that property. The first would be if he acquires Mr. Horsting's property and then has a 50-foot lot. The second would be for the ZBA to agree with his request for variances, and then the ZBA would come before you with their recommendation to allow him to build. And the last way would be for the appropriate government bodies in Evanston to rewrite or change the existing zoning laws. None of these have happened so far. And I want to voice my opposition to this development as it currently stands. And I certainly concur with the people who have spoke to you before me. Thank you.
Thank you. Dick Horsting.
First, I'd like to thank all of my neighbors. If you talk about the city of Evanston, it really isn't made up of the people that I'm sitting in front of here. It's made up of my neighbors that have stood against this proposal to be built. That's what a neighborhood is. We're different in every type, but we all seem to really get along in this. So I've lived and owned the property at 2624 Reese Avenue for nearly 32 years. My maternal grandmother and grandfather lived in the home from 1944 until 1983. My grandmother's sister's husband, Mr. John Moore, built the house in 1925. I did not inherit the house as most people believe. I paid for it. After I got divorced in 1986, I had to sell my home in Oak Park, and my family begged me to come up and take care of the home so my grandmother could sell it. I planned on being there for a year, and I was going to move to California for a new career. When my grandmother found out I was living in her house, she begged me to stay there one more year before she died. I've been there ever since. It's my home in a neighborhood where families have lived for decades, raised their families, paid their taxes, and taken care of their homes and neighbors. Unlike Mr. James, who's very rarely ever cut the property and put such a disfiguration on my house, anybody's home here would not sell because of the conditions of this lot that this man has created. Tonight, this fact couldn't be more self-evident. The last 3 times this housing plan has come before the city's ZBA, it's been shot down unanimously by the neighbors in the ZBA. In fact, the first owner who paid for the property after it went into tax foreclosure came to my house back in 2016 and threatened me. He said, I just bought this property in a tax foreclosure, and I want to let you know you don't know who you're dealing with. I need to talk to you at 9 o'clock at night. I don't let anybody in 9 o'clock at night. So that started that. He sold it to a family that were so concerned they didn't even go to the ZBA because they knew they wouldn't win. In other words, all my neighbors came to vote against this plan. The city of Evanston, like I said, is neighborhoods that extend from Howard to Isabella, from Lake to Crawford. They contain thousands of homes and families that make the city their home. These people live in my neighborhood should be able to determine what goes on in their neighborhood, especially when deceptive and fraudulent building plans are put in front of them, like the one Mr. James is proposing. This proposed plan is breaking every major variance on all 9 sides and dimensions. If the rule of the law and variance are held accountable, the house could only be 5 feet wide, 40 feet long. And when I talk about 9 sides, I'm talking about the side of the house on both sides, front of the house, the back of the house, all 4 sides of the garage. And Mr. James wants to have a foundation dug down 12 feet. There isn't a basement in Wilmette or in Evanston, northwest Evanston, that's below 5 or 6 feet below grade. Every neighbor that's here has a walk-up house where the grade is usually 5 feet down below. So as I said, there are currently 5 houses on this block. This would make it 6. Every neighbor block in my neighborhood has 4 houses, so it's already condensed enough. The house next to me was built in 1940, and they weren't allowed to build a basement due to the structural problems and the integrity that affected both the house at 2620 and my house at 2624. This creates not only a parking inconvenience, a fire safety hazard, water and sewer issues, and most important to me, it causes a severe and personal enjoyment of my property from the close proximity and the structural issues of a basement excavation of 12 feet, less than 5 feet from my house. Not the property line, but the physical structure. Due to the fact that it's a grandfathered non-conforming property, it's only 3 feet from the property line on the north side. Mr. James has owned this property for nearly 2 years. At the last ZBA meeting, he didn't even know the actual square footage of the house, his height. He actually was basically clueless when it came to any information that he could get. If this is how this committee wants to do business, they better review these plans and make an actual trip to this neighborhood and see in person how these plans will completely disrupt the neighborhood for the next 100 years. And if these major variances are granted, the precedent that will be set will be completely wipe out any order for any variance discrepancy in the future. And the legal ramifications will forever alter the city of Evanston going forward, or in this case, backward, erasing years of controlled codes and variances that give a neighborhood space and conformity. At the last ZBA meeting, they kind of laughed at me because I brought up Wade Clark's structural engineering report talking about how dangerous this would be to build that close to a house nearly 100 years old. No one took it seriously. Mr. Wade Clark, a former neighbor of mine, lives out in Oregon, is one of the premier structural engineers in the world, flies all around the world doing structural evaluations. The side yard setback will not only adversely affect my home's foundation, it will also affect my security, safety, noise, water runoff, and will contribute to corner sidewalk and garage blockage sightlines for the children and families who live on Reese and Lincolnwood. And most importantly, my privacy when the house extends 15 feet behind the rear of my house, covers over 50% of my backyards. 28 feet high, half of my backyard, all I'm looking at is a house 3 feet from my property line. So if I have where my fence is, I'm going to have a house 28 feet tall. It's beyond comprehension. Please don't try and disrupt the neighborhood with an investment speculator that only wants to build a non-conforming house on a piece of land that only allows a 5-foot wide house to be built if it follows current code. Don't try and grandfather in a home now where non-conforming grandfathered homes such as mine has existed for nearly 100 years. I can't help my house is the smallest one in the neighborhood. It was built within 4 to 5 years of almost every home in the neighborhood. The precedent that these plans will affect if adopted will not only change a neighborhood, it will legally change the code and law and civility for the next 100 years and literally open up Pandora's box. Thank you.
Sue Carlson.
Good evening, committee members. I'm not speaking today on P4 because I will be directly impacted by this proposed zoning relief on Reese. In fact, I'm here because our property has been impacted by a similar earlier decision to allow an incredible addition of impermeable surfaces on our neighbor's property. Not only do these variances that happen here in Evanston allow increasing amounts of impermeable surfaces, but they cause increased flooding on neighbors' properties, like mine. Moreover, they cause increased runoff into our sewers, which then causes additional untreated water to be released into Lake Michigan, as we experience some more severe storms with more frequency. I think this is a sustainable issue as well as a neighborhood issue. So I'm on the sustainable part, but I've also been impacted by these decisions. So I would really recommend that you turn down the proposal of the city folks who have said that you should approve this and go with the zoning board of appeal that say you should deny it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Newman, Kathy Miller. Evening.
Hi, I'm Mark Newman. I live right across the street from where the house is supposed to be. As you can see from the people that have talked here, this is a pretty controversial issue, and I hope you're not taking any umbrage as what they're saying. It's very emotional in many ways. It deals with a lot of issues of runoff. It deals with a lot of other things that we have talked about, safety, et cetera, et cetera. Mr. James wants to build a 2-story house. Funny thing is, there's 2 other houses that provide a model for him. They are not 2 stories. It would be very easily to adapt the other 2 that are on the other 2 corners so that he could get his house and build it. Initially, everyone opposed this. I think a lot of people still oppose it. We recognize that something might be built, but we'd rather have something built that's scalable. To give you an idea of what it would be for me looking out of my window, okay, you're here, and Hartselle at this point is narrower than any other half block. If we were to go approximately where the door is, that's what I'd have. I'd have a 28-foot, 2-story house looking at me across the whole way. I don't think that that's a really good thing. And no one's even talked about the trees and other things that would be affected by this. I humbly beg that you follow the zoning board and deny this request. He does have a model to look for. He just doesn't want to use it. Thank you.
And Kathy Miller's next. Bill Sale is after Kathy.
Thank you. Kathy Miller, 2831 Hartzell, across the street from this proposed development. I've worked very closely with the neighbors, and I want you to know that we have 28 families who've been opposed to this. It's been a growing group because they can't actually believe that this is a buildable lot. So Alderman Suffredin has had to kind of suffer through hearing this from all of his constituents. I also want to bring up the point that there are neighbors who have come to speak, but the sign-in sheet has not been outside. So they would like to. We have people with special expertise to speak to you, so we want to make sure that Colleen and Bob get to speak.
I've got their names, so.
Thank you. Because one of the things, when we originally started, what you always hear from our neighbors is the water runoff problem. And we've heard various different excuses in the number of times we've gone to the Zoning Board of Appeals. But know that they deal with these issues regularly, and they have rejected this proposal twice. The chairman of the ZBA stated particularly that her interest and her concern to the hardship to the neighbors was one of mine, is that besides being potentially, very potentially destructive to Mr. Horsting's property, 3 feet from the sidewalk is probably the distance from the back of your chair to the front of your desk. About this far is way we want to. He wants to build a 2-story, 50-foot long wall along our street with no visible sight line at the corner of Hartzell and Reese. The other 3 neighbors, Nancy and Dirk and I, sit back our 15 feet, and that you can cars can see very well. But this is going to have a major impact. It's kind of like Trump's wall. That's the way we feel about it. And so did the chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals. So on number 1, she mentioned that. Scott Gingold, one of your members of the ZBA, cited that he feels that that the water runoff is a major hardship for the neighborhood, and that was one of the reasons why they said this. Carol Rinchev, who is an architect on the ZBA, also said that this house has rather, in his opinion, a luxurious staircase, that it really could be narrowed. But the applicant comes back with a 3.4% change, and ZBA gives total consideration to this. They have gone out of their way to give this builder an opportunity to make his points. They've been bent over backwards to be fair. The staff has done the same. But again, they oppose this. I urge you to do the same. Otherwise, as the point Nancy made, it makes a mockery of the committees that the citizens with volunteer time that are doing this for serious reasons over a course of a couple of years. You're making a mockery of their work, and they put a lot of time into this. So I strongly urge you to reject these 6 major variances. Not minor variances, major variances. Thank you.
Bill Sales next, and then we have Robert Rizza and Colleen Barkley. And if the rest of the speakers, just be mindful of what those before you said, so kind of focus on, you can say you agree with them, but maybe I'm sure you want to hear our conversation about it as well before it's, too late in the evening. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to comment on this petitioner's case for approval that I saw for the first time as I walked in here this evening, and specifically the 4th paragraph where he identifies this central issue. And within that paragraph, the 2nd sentence, which says the petitioner has submitted 2 reasonable proposals to the zoning board, both of which were rejected. I think the centrality of the central issue is in that sentence. But I would move to strike the word reasonable. I think the facts are that 2 proposals were presented, and both of them were rejected. Reasonableness is what we debated twice. Reasonableness is what the ZBA considered very carefully twice, and reasonableness is what the ZBA rejected twice. That is the process that we participated in as citizens Those are the outcomes, and now to come back and say, we went through this process, now let's throw that out and decide something else, I think invalidates what we took at face value as citizens coming here to participate in this thing, and reasonableness was on the table. It cannot be just stated as that was the truth. Reasonableness was on the table, discussed twice, rejected twice. What else is there to discuss?
Thank you. Robert, is it Ryan or Riza?
Ryan.
All right, Robert, thank you.
I wrote it fast, I'm sorry. I'm Robert Ryan, 2831 Hartzell, across the street from the proposed development. The applicants claim that the difficulty or hardship is due to the size and narrowness of the lot, 25 feet wide, and location on the corner, and that this is not a self-created hardship is incorrect. The difficulty or hardship are self-imposed, as the size of the lot and the location of the lot were well known at the time of purchase. The applicant either did not do due diligence prior to the purchase or was aware that the lot was non-compliant and would require major variances, and yet he proceeded with the purchase anyway. I urge you to oppose this builder's proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. And Colleen Barkley.
Good evening. I would like to just make this brief. I second all my neighbors' comments here, and I would also like to just address two other issues. One, as a practicing landscape architect licensed in the state of Illinois, I have a deep respect for heritage trees. Surrounding this lot, there's one on my neighbor's property to the south that is a heritage beautiful oak. And secondly, there is another larger elm tree on the parkway. Both of these trees are in the heritage category because of the size of the caliper, the DBH of the tree. And the radius of that tree, the critical root zone, extends upon the center of the tree every inch per foot it extends. So some of these trees, their critical root zone is 20, 30 feet, which overlaps this entire property. There's no way to preserve, which is in the ordinance of the zoning of the landscape ordinance of the zoning of Evanston, to preserve these trees that we have in our community. Secondly, as many have already addressed the drainage, there is one that I've had to cross myself with Evanston in the past, and that's the code where all the downspouts have to be 10 feet back from the sidewalks. This is not possible on this corner lot with what's been proposed, and all that water would either have to flow to the alley or directly to the south to my neighbor and then again to my neighbor, which we already received many flooding. And I don't think it's safe to push it to the alley because we have, as we're experiencing cold temperatures right now, freeze and thaw cycles, that is just not safe. So health and the safety of the welfare and the drainage of the land, I ask you to think about this and oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a number of other people signed up, but you didn't mark what you're here to talk about. Is there anybody else who wanted to speak to this item who'd signed up? Okay. I'm just going to, in case you signed up on this sheet, I want to read a few names. If you meant to sign up on the council sheet, you'll want to do that instead of this sheet. So Belinda McKinley, Angela Bronca, Robin Robinson, Margaret Rothke, Sirletta Hilton, and the penmanship rivals mine in some of these instances, so I apologize. You're not on, I'm sorry, Lonnie Wilson, Vivian Chow. I know you, Lonnie. And Andrew Fisher. So if you meant to sign up for the council, make sure you sign up on the council sheet. Should be out there still. Yeah, thank you. Okay, no further speakers on this item. Let's see, no lights. Anybody want to talk a little bit about this? Alderman Nguyen?
Well, this is, I have a question about, and this is for staff. How is this lot considered deemed buildable if in order to build on it, you have a 5-foot wide house?
I'll ask Scott to answer that as we see these questions come up sometimes.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is a legally created lot, so it is something that can be built upon. However, as noted, based on the dimensions of the lot, variations would likely be required for pretty much anything. There are a number of non-conforming lots in the city that were created often before the zoning code was created.
Mm-hmm. Well, but Scott, we've had others of those come up before us over the years, but never one that I can think of that is this extreme. So I think that that's really a conundrum here, that the question is then what is considered buildable here without major variations that would fit on the lot. Did the ZBA discuss that? I don't see that in their discussion.
I think it's pretty well accepted that the variations would be required to build a single-family residence on this lot, which is what it's zoned for. I think the degree and the type of zoning variations are what a lot of the discussion's been about.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
And the applicant is, I see you're here as well to answer any questions.
I think I had to sign up, so I didn't sign up.
Okay.
So thank you for letting me speak. And I do have paper copies of what I emailed earlier today. If I can hand these out.
Thank you. Thanks.
So you've heard a lot of public comment, and I never realized what a horrible person I was until I came here. Well, actually, I heard it twice before when I went to ZBA, but I think I should really start by explaining why I'm here, why this case is here. I built 22 houses in Evanston, as a side business. So I'm actually an urban planner, neighborhood planner, community planner by profession, and I do this as kind of a hobby on the side. I never really thought of myself as a speculator, but I came into this lot because the prior owner had her broker contact people that she knew built houses in Evanston and offered it for sale because of, frankly, the kind of reception that you see here tonight. Very significant neighbor opposition, and I was told that owner wouldn't want to live in the neighborhood after all this commotion, even if it were approved, even if her petition were approved. So I did do diligence on the lot. First thing I did was to contact city staff and ask them, what's the city policy with respect to this lot? Is it a buildable lot, or does the city intend that this never be built on? And I was told that the city policy is that this is a buildable lot, that a house should be built on this. And in saying so, there's a recognition that variances must be granted. Yes, the degree of variation is, I think, at issue here, should be what's at issue here. But given the fact that it's a 20-foot wide lot corner, 20-foot wide corner lot. The corner side yard requirement is 15 feet. The interior side yard requirement is 5 feet. That does leave only 5 feet of buildable width. So if it is buildable, then there has to be some significant relief granted in these zoning standards. So I looked at the prior application, which was the prior owner's application. It was a much bigger house than what I thought should be built there. I thought I could build a smaller, reasonably sized house that would meet the standards. And so and I also asked city staff, I said, well, the neighbors are opposed to the prior owner's petition, kind of drove her out of the process. Will that be how the case is decided, by the strength of the neighbor opposition? And I was told, no, it wouldn't be, that if the neighbors' objections have technical merit, they would be considered. If they don't, then they won't be. But in my opinion, the ZBA really sided with the neighbors and did not really follow the standards of the ordinance. The standards do not say anything about neighbor opposition, actually. So they're all technical, and I believe, frankly, the first petition that I presented met the standards. And actually, the DAPR Commission, the DAPR Committee, thought so and voted in favor by a vote of 7-1 for that first petition. That first petition, and I urge you to go back and look at the records, look at the prior plans, which should be part of the public record, and advance this to a full council vote after you've done your research. I do think some of the neighbor comments mischaracterize both my first plan and this plan as well. So my first proposal met the interior side yard of 5 feet, proposed a 16-foot wide house, had a 3.5-foot corner side yard, which obviously is a significant variance. It required only a minor variation for building lot coverage. It met the impervious surface coverage. Needed the variations for parking in the front or corner side yard, because I proposed a 2-car garage that would go into that corner side yard. It was a full 2-story house, which was taller than some of the houses in the neighborhood, but equal to others in the neighborhood. That proposal was rejected by the ZBA on a unanimous vote. And if you look at the comments that were made, both by the ZBA and by the neighbors, there were, in addition to the comments that you've heard about stormwater and the neighbor's foundation and the trees, the things that I could control with my design were the height of the house. Even though I wasn't asking for a height variance, they said make the house lower. They said the house extends too far into the rear yard, more than other houses on the block, shorten that up. And there was discussion about the 2-car garage blocking visibility coming out of the alley to Hartzell Street, make a 1-car garage. So I incorporated all those changes, not in order to get in front of you, but because those were comments that I could respond to in a revised proposal. So I made those. I made the house smaller. Yes, the actual first floor footprint is not substantially smaller. I had to widen the house in order to make it smaller, make it less tall, so that the second floor is within part of the roof structure. So instead of a 16-foot wide house, I had to go to an 18.5-foot wide house. Instead of having a 5-foot interior side yard, I now have a 3-foot interior side yard, which quite frankly is the prevailing interior side yard in that neighborhood. The neighbor to the south has an interior side yard of less than 3 feet to our common property line. And frankly, in the city of Chicago, people build with 3-foot interior side yards all the time, and it can be done safely. So my new proposal responds to the comments that were made at the first ZBA meeting with the first proposal. And the second proposal, again, I went to DAPR. They approved it. I believe it was 8-1. And in front of ZBA, yes, there were comments made. Well, you're getting closer. Yeah, this is better than the last one. But there was never a yardstick of what I needed to do to get to something that they would approve. So, and frankly, given the tenor of the meeting and the ZBA comments, which clearly favored the neighbors, I really think that there is no proposal I could make on this lot, given neighbor opposition, that would pass ZBA. Let me just say that the neighbors are unified in opposition. There are neighbors who believe that a house should be built on the lot. They have not a lot, okay, but you always find these kinds of things bring out more opposition than they do people who support what you're proposing. So I was cutting the lawn one day and a couple came by with their dog and said, well, you're proposing to build a house on this lot? I said, yes, I am. They said, well, we support this. We think it's better to have a house on this lot than, a vacant lot. A couple people emailed me, said, yeah, I know the neighbors are really extreme and, you're going to get a lot of pushback, but we think your proposal is good for the lot, good for the neighborhood. So there are some neighbors who actually, I don't, they don't want to come forward, obviously, because of the opposition that's pretty extreme. So, but you should be aware that there are neighbors in this area that would do support building on the lot. Let me also say that the zoning of this area as R1 creates, frankly, a lot of nonconformity. The existing conditions here don't even meet R2 regulations in terms of lot size, in terms of lot area, the yards, and so forth. So the fact that this is R1 creates a lot of nonconformity within the area, and this house would not be out of character with other homes in the area. If you were to look at my first DAPR presentation, I do cite other 20-foot wide corner lots that have been built on since the zoning ordinance was adopted, that zoning relief was granted to these other 25-foot wide corner lots, and that the house I'm proposing is actually smaller than most, if not all, of these other homes that exist on corner lots in the neighborhood of 25-foot width. So I believe the central issue here is how these kinds of decisions should be made, and if it's really all up to the neighbors, then then you should really put it in your ordinance that neighbor sentiment will prevail and all of these kinds of things. Again, I asked staff, your representatives, whether this lot was buildable. I have sought to obtain guidance from staff and through the ZBA. What can I do to create a house that would be approved by ZBA? I really got no definitive feedback. Is it their job? Well, it's not necessarily their job, but in a way it is their job. There should be some guidance provided. Not just, well, that's not quite it, that's not quite it, that's not quite it. So if you look at the proposal, I believe you'll see that it is a modest house, and it is in scale and character with the other homes in this area. It is a story and a half high. It's not a full two-story house, even though the house immediately to the west on Hartzell is a full two-story house. There are other full two-story houses on this block of Reese. There are one-story houses too, and there are homes that are a story and a half tall. I believe this is very much in keeping with the other homes in the neighborhood. I invite you to drive by and to look at it, and to look at the other homes that are on these 25-foot wide corner lots. And I think you will find that this is a reasonable proposal, and if in fact it is the city's policy that this is a lot that should be built on, that a house should go here, I think you'll find that this is a proposal that merits your approval. So with that, I will leave you to your considerations.
Hang around close in case there are any questions. Alderman Rainey, who next?
No, not right now.
Okay.
Not right now. Sorry.
Alderman Fisk?
I think Alderman Suffredin was before me.
I didn't have your light. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
I guess first of all, Mr. James, I don't think that you're evil. I think that you're just in this instance you're trying to build too large of a house on too small of a lot, and I don't know. When staff told you that it was buildable, they gave you no guidance at all on what you could put there? This is 2016 that you're talking about?
Yes. Okay. So they said you have to meet the standards. That's what they said. It's up to you to meet the standards.
And I guess I'd like to understand better, how do we end up with a DAPR recommendations and ZBA unanimous denials consistently? Are there different standards being applied?
No, not necessarily. No, the answer is no. Affirmatively, there are not different standards applied. DAPR Design and Project Review Committee is comprised of myself, Gary Gerdes, the building official, Scott, our zoning administrator, Laura Biggs, city engineer, a couple other zoning members, a member of representative from fire, parking, and our water utility. I think there's one more that I'm missing off. Transportation mobility. So it's a panel of staff from different fields. So we review it similar to ZBA. We review the zoning code in relation to a particular proposal and have a discussion and then make a recommendation. It isn't. We sometimes have members of the public present, and they can provide public comment. And sometimes, if we feel like we need to see a project again, somebody will return. We meet each week, but no, there's not different standards, and it's just a different perspective and opinion on recommending approval for a project.
Okay. No, thank you. I'm sympathetic to your situation, but I do think this particular project that you're asking us to allow you to move forward with is too big. I don't know what the goal line is, though, and I feel bad because it sounds like that's the guidance that you're looking for. But I just want to urge my colleagues to vote no on this. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to point out that, and I was recommended to mention this, that after the first ZBA meeting, I did talk to staff. I talked to Melissa Klotz, who's your zoning planner, and actually asked her to inquire with the ZBA, what kinds of changes should I make, and I was told to look at the comments that were made by ZBA and by the neighbors at the hearing, and that's what I've attempted to do here. If I had gotten more explicit direction, I certainly would have endeavored to follow it. I'm concerned that, I first proposed a 16-foot wide house. For whatever reasons, that didn't pass. I have been flexible when I did meet with the neighbors, actually, before I went to the first, with the first proposal, before I made the first proposal. And, frankly, I had some alternatives and tried to probe which of these would be preferable. All of them were 3-bedroom, 2-bath, because that's what I was looking for initially. That's what I thought was a reasonable kind of standard house to build. This proposal is really a 2-bedroom house, so I've scaled that back. But in this meeting with the neighbors, there were suggestions that I make the house smaller and a 2-bedroom house, and I asked, well, if I do make a 2-bedroom house, 2-bedroom proposal, would you support it? And the answer was no, we're not supporting it. So I really do think that no house is the desired outcome of the neighbors. I don't think it's a smaller house, and I would be happy if you were to recommend this go to full council, and if there were a conditional approval subject to a change that you think is reasonable, I'd be happy to entertain that. I just don't want something that is so unworkable that nobody would want to live in the house, and I couldn't, sell the house. So that is, like I said, I'm willing to be reasonable. I'm willing to make changes. I've done about 4 or 5 or 6 different plans for this property, and I am willing to do anything that is reasonable that will result in a workable, livable house.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a really difficult situation. My first question is, was there ever a house on this lot before, or has it always been a vacant lot?
I believe no house has ever existed here.
Okay. Was the property owned by the house next door, or has it always been in?
I don't know the history. All I know is the person that I bought it from eventually came out of a tax sale. But I don't know the history of the house. Matt?
Matt Rogers, I've been consulting with Mr. James to answer your question. We know since at least 1960, according to city records, there's been no house on this property. But it was subdivided at that time or prior to that time to be a 25-foot wide lot.
It was subdivided off the property?
But we don't know if that happened all at once, where they made all 3 lots 70, they took 75 feet and made them all 25s, or what. But we know.
Okay, I see somebody with a hand. Do you remember what was there before 1960?
Well, let's put it this way. There's no older family than mine. I'm part of the Wagner farm family. All 4 of my grandparents were here from 1860 on. I have the original plat of survey in my file here that shows the 3 corner lots, including the lot next to me by some great neighbors. It shows all 3 25 corner foot lots. I will bring up again that the lot at 2622 is owned by Cairo Building Material. They bought it in 1925 to use for a storage area for all types of soil and excavation from the neighborhoods, because they don't have the construction equipment that they have today. I have the original 1925 plat, a survey in my briefcase. There's never been a lot built there. The Welch family owned this property for probably 85 years. They begged me for years to sell my half so they could build a house and they could make money. I asked if I could ever get my money back. They said, no, you won't make the money, but we will because we can't build on it. I have Tom Robarchek's appraisal from the house in 1987, a well-known realtor stating that the house, he did thorough research stating that city already told him nobody could build on it. It's a non-buildable lot. Nothing has been built there. The house next to me at 2622 was built in 1940. They couldn't build a basement, and due to the World War II, it's a beautiful home. I'm not even going to tell you what it did sell for because it deserves to be sold for what it did. But it shows the price of the neighborhood, and to be honest with you, Mr. James is trying to build something it's impossible. The Welch family tried for 70 years to build on there. My grandmother was in tears all the time telling me one of the reasons I bought the house is because she was in fear that the Welch family would take over the property and knock hers down. Once I started to get a little family heritage, like the oak tree in my backyard that Colleen so graciously mentioned, I realized it's my home, and I've talked about it before. All of my neighbors live in homes. This guy's trying to build a house. He doesn't even live in a neighborhood. So if you want to see the Plata survey, I'd be glad to forward it to you.
I appreciate that history there, so we have a sense of what's been going on for that period of time.
Could I go on with my question?
Yes, sorry. Yes, Alderman Fisk.
Thanks.
Okay, answer to your question.
That was my first question.
Okay.
My second question is for Johanna. City staff is recommending adoption. Can you just tell me what that means? It says city staff recommends adoption, zoning board of appeals recommends denial.
The decision is before the council to approve the ordinance that would allow the variations to let this project go forward.
Okay. Does that come as a result from the DAPR vote? Is that where we're...
City staff recommends?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that's from the DAPR vote. Okay, aside from the neighbor objections, I think this is a really interesting question because in Northwest Evanston, there are a lot of 25-foot lots, and it's zoned R1, and they're inconsistent with one another. And I think it's probably a good idea for this committee at some point, or the Plan Commission at some point, to talk about what we do with non-conforming R1 lots when it comes to redevelopment plans. I mean, to me, this would be a perfect lot for a small house that we were discussing at council, a few weeks ago. I don't know whether that's something that's interesting to Mr. James or not, but that may be where we're going with some of these smaller lots. I am concerned about the reaction of the neighbors. I understand that change is really difficult, and especially when you're faced with having a structure where there has not been a structure before, and I know how devastating that can be to neighbors. I'm also concerned about the depth of the basement. I don't have those plans in front of me, but if you're digging down a 12-foot deep basement, I think that's going to cause you problems in your house. But it's also a concern for the neighbors surrounding you.
Right. Well, I obviously will work with the building department. They require a engineer's letter on the excavation and the shoring. If there is a problem in that, let me worry about that. If I can get the zoning approval and go forward to prepare actual construction plans, that's the only way these kinds of issues can be addressed, and I will obviously do that at my own risk.
My final comment is you've built other houses in Evanston. I've seen some of them. They're beautiful. I think you've done a very nice job on this house. I think a 1.5-story house is appropriate. I'm just not there yet to being able to approve this house on this lot, given the lady with the oak tree, wherever you are. You hit my button with the oak tree. So
may I respond to that tree question?
Yes, but let me just say one other thing, though. But I would like to see, and I'm almost thinking we should keep this in committee for another meeting, but I'd like to see a list from staff of the other houses that have been built on 25-foot wide lots that are on corners in Northwest Evanston. I would just like to go by and take a look at those.
I mean, I do have, not all of them, but I do have some of them in this document.
Okay,
So I
that
can
would be
give you-
great to share with staff.
All right. Yeah, I had, I guess, some observations and comments, and I have a couple more lights, I think, as well. But one of the things that does strike me about this is that this is sort of the opposite of a trend that I think we've been trying to push back against, which the trend is people buying small lots, and to your point, buying a couple of lots adjacent to each other and building great big homes. So this is kind of the other direction, in the direction I think that we've been trying to move. So to the extent that somebody puts a home on this property, it eliminates that possibility or maybe even probability of somebody trying to expand that.
That was raised at some point in various conversations, well, you should buy the house next door, and, if that were to be done, the basis in the land would be such that you'd have to max out, and you would build a huge house that would create all the impacts that the neighbors are complaining about now, but to a much greater degree. And it would all be done as of right. You wouldn't have any control over it. So,
Right, and that makes it makes sense. I've seen some of these homes; they're spectacular, they're very beautiful. But we've had a lot of conversation here about policy as opposed to subsidizing. Policy that promotes and preserves affordable housing. And, this is a 2-bedroom home. It's not a massive McMansion. It's fairly modest, and it's a bit of a step down. It doesn't escape my attention. I've heard a number of comments about the prior owners, but in conjunction with something completely unrelated to this, I heard from the prior owners, and it's a little sad and it's a little disturbing, I guess, because among the comments here, it's somebody who had lived in Evanston for 10 years, I think, and they said, "Never have I been treated with such distrust by complete strangers." And somebody told them, "We'll be fine if you get to build, but we both know it's better if you don't. We were called opportunists for wanting to build ourselves a nice home. And judgmental statements were made about us by people we never met. It left us frustrated, disheartened, and dumbfounded that a city like Evanston, with all its diversity and acceptance, could have neighbors treat each other so poorly." So I just want to, remind everybody that what gets said has an impact on other people. It's okay to advocate. It's okay to make your points, and I respect that. There are legitimate concerns that have been voiced here today. I understand those points, but at the same time, this gentleman might not be your next door neighbor, but somebody else who could have been your next door neighbor left our town with that feeling, and that doesn't feel good to me. So I find that quite disappointing. Alderman Ravel and then Alderman Rainey.
I guess I'd like to second a lot of Alderman Fisk's comments and questions. I think this is a really difficult lot. I did go over there today. I parked, I walked around. I have to say, when I first got there, I drove past because I couldn't see the lot. I mean, calling it a vacant lot doesn't describe it. It's like the neighbor's side yard. So it's the challenge, and not only that it's only 25 feet wide, but it's because it's the corner lot. And I think Alderman Fisk is right that we need to spend some time, perhaps, at this committee looking at what is possible with these really small lots. And I think maybe it'll be an opportunity for us, though, if we want to move further in the direction of creating more smaller, affordable housing. And so I guess I would like to have us put at least that, not your proposal on our agenda for the future, but this whole conversation about some of these smaller lots in Northwest Evanston or wherever they may happen to be. I guess I know you've made a lot of effort to try to come up with something that would meet the ZBA standards and meet with the neighbors' approval. And I do think you've worked in good faith on that. But have to agree with Alderman Suffredin that I think the house is still, it's too much for that lot, and I can't approve it.
Alderman Rainey, did you want to comment? Or have a
Yes.
question? Go ahead.
I'm wondering, Johanna, if you can tell me Ingrid's comments regarding water retention and runoff on Dapper. Every time I have been to Dapper, that is her main concern, and I'm wondering, do you recall her concerns? Because water runoff is a big concern in this project.
If you have another question, I just pulled up the minutes. I can look and see. It was in August that we did this.
It would seem to me that if the tree roots and the heritage trees are an issue, this lot nothing can be built on this lot. So not having anything to do with variations, but if the concern is the trees, are the two heritage trees, nothing can be built here because any excavation will most likely damage those roots. So I'm wondering why the neighbors who are so possessive of this lot, and that's not a negative thing, why you haven't gotten together and purchased this lot so that no one will ever be able to build there. Not necessarily so you can share the two people who are next to it, increase their side yard, but just possess the lot as a neighborhood asset. And would you be willing to sell the lot to the neighbors? I mean, I understand, and I'm not finished talking though, but I understand that you really want to build something here. But I want to say something to these neighbors. I've known this man. We're not buddies or anything, but I've known
my political connections. Is that
All
right?
Would you pardon me?
Sorry. You're one of my political connections.
Yeah. Yeah,
that was a joke.
He hasn't called me lately, though. I've known him, I think, 30 years as a planner, mainly as a planner, back in the day when we were doing neighborhood planning in the south end of town. He's a neighbor. He's very well liked in his neighborhood. He is nothing like the person you're describing. None of us think of him as a speculator. He's built houses in the 8th Ward. They're very nice houses. They're very small. Another observation I'm making tonight is here we have a person who's going to build a small house. We can't get it done. We also have 2 units of affordable housing in a building that we're going to be talking about pretty soon that nobody would rent. So, I mean, we're having a little problem with irony here. And so let's talk about selling the lot to the neighbors.
Well, if that's a question.
It's a question. I really want to know if Alderman, if this lot, if we cannot, I will. If we cannot build, if no one can build on this lot, I cannot imagine a project that is buildable on this lot, given the concerns we've heard tonight. Judy Fisk's buttons were pushed tonight with the tree thing. If it is true that these 2 trees will die, if you build on the lot.
How do we know that?
Well,
can your forestry department weigh in on this?
Our forestry department can weigh in on it, but our staff weighed in on the fact that it's a buildable lot. Where did that get you?
Okay.
I'm just saying, we've got a problem.
Ms. Leonard, I think, has the answer to your question about the neighbors purchasing.
Runoff.
I don't have an answer to that question. I have an answer to the one, the discussion at Dapper. So there were some questions from our building official, Gary Gertis, suggesting that there be a soil study to verify that a basement is feasible related to the water table. So it is practice that we ask for that soil test to determine where the water table is. Then there was a discussion regarding shoring between the existing residence and the proposed project. So the applicant stated steel would be used and that the required shoring would be done. And the only comment recorded in the minutes is Ingrid stating that shoring will also be required along the street right away due to proximity. So
she had no major concern about water runoff.
It's not noted in the minutes. So
because that is her key issue. Right.
I don't think that is an issue.
Okay, and so my inclination is if we were legitimately going to entertain a way to make this work, it wouldn't be a bad idea to come back again. But on the other hand, I don't want to make you spend more money. I don't want to have you do soil samples if everybody's just going to say no in a few weeks. So if there's an inclination or an interest to really legitimately have a conversation about this, but to the neighbors, I kind of posed the question. I kind of feel like I want you to be honest with yourselves and more honest with us. If the question is you don't want a house there ever, that's a legitimate point to make. So I think if that's really the issue, and you don't have to say it this second, but generally speaking, going forward, say that. So if that's the issue, as opposed to, come back with this other thing, come back with this other thing. So we don't want people to keep coming back and coming back and coming back if really the threshold question is, we don't think we want a house here. And I don't want to, we've got a council meeting after this. I don't want to, torture it too much here, but Alderman Fisk, you had your light on.
Mr. James, I don't know what you paid for the lot, and it's not my business, so you don't have to tell me that. But I do think that there is an opportunity here to look at a small house. I mean, what we've been talking about as a council, that would be a small, affordable house on this property. I think it's worthwhile for you to talk with staff about what our previous conversations have been at council, but also to meet with the aldermen and the neighbors as well. Just kind of talk again about what that might possibly be. I don't want you to have to invent the wheel here, but this is the type of lot. I'm not sure this is exactly the right lot, but this is the type of lot that, as Alderman Wilson says, that we've been looking for a long time.
What do you mean by a small house?
A small, not a tiny house. Not a tiny house.
Well, I think that.
I mean, I thought it was
let me put it this way. Would you be willing to me, this is small enough, but I think you got a sense that amongst the people at the table here that it's not small enough for some. Would you be willing to take the next few weeks and to have further conversations with the staff about what might be an option or alternatives to bring it into a range that might be acceptable?
Yes. I said if there is a workable house, that can function well, that's livable, that's marketable, I'm open to it. And I asked for that type of guidance in the past.
I understand. Is there a motion? Maybe we could get a motion to hold it to the next meeting?
I move we hold it till the next meeting.
Okay.
Second.
All right, thank you. So we'll hold this over to the next meeting. I think everybody heard, what everybody's kind of thinking, so collectively give it all some thought, have conversations amongst yourselves, but, be open and communicate with the property owner and see if there's a way to kind of close the gap here and make something that's workable and that everybody can be content with. I think, it's Evanston. There should be a way to do it. It's not a place where we only complain. So, all right. Okay, so that's that for P4. Thank you. And thank you for all the comments, too. I do think it was useful. P5 is Ordinance 144018, granting a special use for a Type 2 restaurant and a drive-through facility for the McDonald's restaurant. Drive-through facility, the McDonald's restaurant at 1919 Dempster. Zoning Board of Appeals and City staff are recommending adoption of the ordinance granting the special use to the Type 2 restaurant and a dual-lane drive-through facility for the McDonald's restaurant in the C2 district. The applicant has complied with the zoning requirements, meets all of the standards of a special use for the district. It's for introduction, and Alderman Braithwaite, although not designated so on the agenda, Alderman Braithwaite is requesting suspension of the rules for the item. Is that correct, Alderman Braithwaite? Okay. Okay. Is there anyone here to speak to the McDonald's drive-thru? Okay. Alderman Fisk, was your light on from before, or is that new? Okay, I apologize. All right. I think it's a good idea because this is a hang-up for traffic on Dempster, so That would provide relief for that. Any further discussion?
No.
I'm sorry, we need a motion. I move that we introduce and suspend the rules.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. Item P6, Ordinance 147-0-18 is a major adjustment to a plan development at 1571 Maple Avenue. Plan Commission and staff are recommending adoption of the ordinance for approval of a major adjustment to the previous plan development at 1571 Maple in order to modify the parking lease condition of approval. It says Z, approval Z, from 101 parking spaces to 70 parking spaces available within either the Maple Avenue or Sherman Avenue garages, as well as to modify the on-site affordable housing condition of approval Q to provide one-bedroom on-site affordable housing unit to households with income at or below 50% of the area median income AMI instead of 2 units affordable to households at or below 100% AMI. The period of affordability of the unit would remain at 10 years from the first rent up. This is also for introduction. To remind everybody, this project was approved prior to the implementation of the affordable housing ordinance, so those provisions are not applicable to this prior plan development. I am requesting suspension of the rules on this one as well. Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Alderman Wilson. First of all, I just want to start out with a comment. We had, I think, tried for a long time to make sure that any request to suspend the rules be submitted to staff so that it could be included on the agenda so that the public would know. So I hope that in future we'll be able to do that. Second question was, when we approved this, I believe the parking spaces were entirely within the Maple Avenue parking garage and not the Sherman Plaza parking garage. I would hate to see Sherman Plaza used for this particular development.
No, it's not. It's not.
It's Maple. It ends up.
It says parking spaces available within either, so it's included.
The agreement.
Yeah, I know, but on what we're being asked.
Ms. Leonard can answer the question.
At DAPR, we discussed the option of opening up spaces. Jill Velan sits on DAPR and had indicated that there were open spaces at Sherman, and that could, and so it's a proposal in the agreement, and we could change that if that's the council's desire.
Right. I would hate to see us using Sherman Plaza parking garage for this. And could staff just speak to the one-bedroom on-site affordable unit, please? I think Alderman Rainey alluded to it earlier.
Can you answer that? Or Ms. Flax is not here, I don't think so. Oh, she is, okay. There you are.
Good evening, Chair Wilson and members of the committee. We actually had a lot of discussion with the developer, and you're right, this was an agreement before the inclusionary housing ordinance. The incomes we were really focusing on in inclusionary housing is 80% and below, with the new ordinance at 60%. So we believe that there will be no problems renting up one unit at 50% of the area median, and that will become a successful part of our inclusionary units, even though it wasn't officially through the inclusionary housing ordinance.
And the provider who is maintaining the waiting list for us has just simply not been able to find tenants for this particular level, correct?
Well, my understanding, and I haven't been involved in all, there have been some people who have looked at it, but one of the challenges we do sometimes find is when you have things that are renting up at the area median, people have other options.
Right.
And in some cases, they simply say they want something that has more space or something like that.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Rainey?
When I read this, I appreciate any effort to put affordable housing in any unit, any place, in any building, any place. However, the issue here is the fact that people of that income level have other alternatives. I've argued for a long time that it is a waste of our time to fight with developers to force them to put units in their building in downtown high-rises. Great for seniors because and people who have physical challenges because of the elevators. That is a very valuable commodity in this town because most of our multifamily housing they're walk-ups. And so that's a challenge for elderly people and people with physical challenges. However, to think for 1 minute that we're going to be placing easily any of the new developments, families with small children in these buildings, I just don't think it's going to happen. And I think we ought to continue to discuss the opportunities, the financial opportunities the Evanston Affordable Housing Fund has by not forcing developers to put these units in their buildings and instead pay to get out of that requirement. And do the proposal where the city finally establishes its own housing subsidy program and allow people to choose their own housing wherever in the city they want to live. And this is not going to be the first time we're going to see this. And this was just 2 units. We're going to see this over and over again. So just keep in mind that we have opportunities of hundreds of thousands of dollars flooding into the Affordable Housing Fund, millions of dollars, as a matter of fact, if we don't force the units on site. If the developer wants to, fine, that'll be great. But if they don't want to, they want to buy out, that's where we ought to be going.
Okay, and so I'm moving that we introduce and suspend the rules. Alderman Fisk, is your light on still, or did I forget to turn it off?
Yeah, Sarah, how many people have looked at these units?
I do not have a number. I could try to get that for you, but I don't have it.
Okay.
Developers here.
Okay, so I'm moving that we introduce and suspend the rules. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that will be a council, which will start. Okay, do we have any items for discussion?
Did we make the change that it's Maple Avenue only?
We can make
Okay.
Thank you.
Make that a council. And you can look at it more closely. You might be okay with the
Sorry.
language. Okay, so any communications? You want an amendment to that?
Yeah, it wasn't formally amended. Yeah,
Can we do that at council?
formally make an amendment. Yeah.
Can we do it at council? That's
Sure.
okay? All right, thank you. Okay, any communications? Is there a motion to adjourn? Okay, second, all in favor? Aye. So we will resume the council meeting. I think everybody's ready to go in about 5 or 6, let's say at 20 till. Thank you.